approached me to talk to all of you, it was quite touching. And then I started to think, why the hell does she want me to talk to these people? And so I'll open with this idea. Who's ever heard of imposter syndrome? Anybody ever heard of it? Okay. But it was coined in the late 70s from a study that had looked at 150 women executives, so high-powered, high-achieving women in business, and sort of like gleaned their psychological profile off of that. But it's a term that I keep on hearing every time that the conversation about women in the workforce comes up. Is mentioned a lot in the Sheryl Sandberg Lean In book, and I keep on hearing it, and it's frequently in relationship to women. But if you read the studies, it's a pattern of behavior that affects most people, men and women, throughout their life. And the simple definition of it is when an individual doesn't feel like that they deserve or were responsible for their accomplishments, right? And so they frequently fear that they're going to be revealed, despite evidence of their own competence, right? External evidence of their own competence, that they're going to be revealed as a fraud or an imposter. And when I tell you my resume, which is what everybody always wants me to talk about to groups, is like, oh, look at this crazy kid and he has all this like weird experience, I think you'll understand that I frequently feel this feeling. And I think it's something that nobody ever really talks about until they're like really close friends. But it's something that I think is important because I think it's something that you'll always go through, especially as you're transitioning from career to career to career. And if you are lucky enough to get some success, then you really feel it. And I've dealt with it a lot in my life, and I'll tell you like at the end like how I sort of make my way through it. And like but the conclusion that I draw is that we all have competencies and we can be successful as generalists or specialists or whatever we ended up doing, and you have to be comfortable with it. But you're always going to feel this like element of doubt, right? And that you're somehow getting something that you shouldn't deserve. Went to school for economics. And then went to grad school for development economics, and that's why I came to DC. So I thought I was going to work for USAID, do that sort of circuit, came down, worked for Brookings Institution, which is a think tank in DC, and did research on international development, spent some time in that policy world, and got bored of it really quickly because I just saw that the pace of it was really, really incremental, and it wasn't for me. Unless I wanted to go back to school and finish a PhD, and I didn't want to do that either. So from that, I moved into DC politics. So that was like the big switch number one. And how that ever happened, it's actually related to food, and it's an interesting anecdote. But I'll tell a little bit about that. So I saw an ad in the newspaper. This was when Mayor Fenty was the mayor in DC, and he was hiring staff. And I said, that seems fun. I have no qualification to do this, but I'm going to apply and see what happens. And they brought me in for an interview. I don't know why. And I did the interview. And it was an okay interview, and I didn't hear from them, right? So I didn't hear from them, and it had been like a number of weeks. I'm like, I guess I didn't get that job. And then I was also moonlighting at the time as like a caterer out of my house. And I was catering a party, and lo and behold, one of the people who had interviewed me was at the party, right? And I started talking to her, and I said, oh, how'd that interview go? And she said, oh, it was good. I meant to get back to you. And then after that party, she called me, and then I got the job. So I made this transition from like international development to now city politics, and I spent a number of years working in various arms of the DC government, and sort of found a niche in economic development because that was like a sort of transferable skill from international development, and went from the administration to the Gray administration, from the Gray administration to Georgetown University doing their government relations, and from Georgetown University to the Georgetown Business Improvement District, and headed up their economic development. That whole time, I had a girlfriend who was like, I think you like cooking better than your day job. and I met Will, about Amanda's son, when he was 15, or about that. So about 12 years ago, 12 or 10 years ago. And so I started picking up part-time jobs in restaurants, and I had cooked as a kid. It was my first job, like when I was in high school. I'd cooked in college to pay bills and have play money and all that type of stuff in college, and came to DC after grad school and wasn't cooking, and this girlfriend was like, go do that, I think you're gonna really like it. And so I started adding more and more and more. So all that first part of my career that I had mentioned, in the nighttime I was going to a restaurant, and it started out with like 5 hours a week I would go to the restaurant, cook a little bit, and then it was like 10 hours, and then 20 hours, and then I was catering parties for my friends, and then catering parties for friends of friends, and that became its own little business. And then by the end of this phase of my life, I was doing 40 hours at the restaurant, 40 hours in my day job. And I said, if you're gonna succeed in one of them more, you should probably allocate it. Like, I'm willing to accept the 80-hour work week, but you should allocate it to one or the other. So that's when I started to make this transition into full-time restaurant life. That was about the time that I joined Minibar. So I joined Minibar as an unpaid intern. We call it stage in the restaurant world. And I worked for Jose for 2 years for free because I had my day job, so I was able to do that. And after 2 years, they paid me for about a year, and then I left the restaurant, and then maybe 2-3 months after I left the restaurant, they called me back and said, hey, do you want to come back and be the executive chef? And I said, yes. And I thought but that's like a key moment where the imposter syndrome really kicks in, because you're thinking like, here I was, this unpaid intern, I'd worked my way through the ranks of the restaurant, but you're still feeling like, why are they giving me this opportunity? They saw something in me, Jose saw something in me, but you're not feeling it yourself. When I was an unpaid intern, actually, Will's fiance, who was 10 years my junior, was my boss at Minibar. So I took over the restaurant. That's when we got Michelin stars, so it was like a big jump in my career as well as a chef.
Did they give you a big raise when you got the Michelin star?
So the conversation of money and passion has always been something that I've struggled with, and we can talk about it in a lot more detail if you want to. I never made the leap. So taking the executive chef job at Minibar was the first full-time chef position that I'd taken in a restaurant. I had worked in like the business administration of restaurants briefly, and that's when I made my switch, but that was the first one. And the reason I never did it was because I was always afraid of the cash. So it's a real fear. I agree with you that you can't let it drive your behavior, and you'll never succeed if you let it drive your behavior. But then there's also a reality of paying for your life, right? And so that's why I did my 40 hours at my day job, because it was paying my bills, and I couldn't afford to be a line cook at that stage of my life. And so I was doing that in addition, moonlighting, right? And trying to burn the candle from both ends. And so, yeah, it's always like a balance, I think, right? And trying to find the balance that's right for each individual is going to be an individual decision as well. I worked at the restaurant until March of this year, and then I'd been there for 5 years total, and decided that it was time to make another change. And so I started with a real estate development consultancy, I would call it. So a spin-off from JBG, which is another big developer in DC. We do just F&B, food and beverage, and retail development as advisors for other real estate developers. And so my job there is just consulting on restaurants. So I get to look at blueprints of restaurants. I see what's wrong with the restaurant before construction begins, kind of what Tom is saying. The architect has a vision. I see the reality of being able to lease the space to a restaurateur, and then we have a conversation, and that's what it is. So you can see where I think it's easily, as an outside observer, to see where the imposter syndrome can take place in my career. It takes place every day. Like, here's this kid that his first executive chef job, he happens to get Michelin stars. I don't know why, but it is what it is. And but the thing that I look back, through the whole career, is I'm a generalist, right? I didn't do a science or STEM career, so I've never had a specialty to fall back on and feel really comfortable about knowing this is my craft.
You're an economist.
And yeah, economists are generalists though. And so what I think it is leadership, and that's obviously a great connection to the armed services. And I think it's twofold though, right? I think that when you are an unpaid intern at a high-scale restaurant or whatever place that you're working in is, the lowest rung on the ladder in the mayor's office, you learn how to be in service of leadership, right? And so I think something that all of you know really well. And in the restaurant industry, it works extremely well, knowing how to be in service of leadership. And so taking those experiences, that has always helped me, right? Knowing how to serve your leader has always made me advance, and you take on leadership as that service leadership continues. And then as a leader, I think that's like where my skill set is, right? And so the restaurant minibar is 50 people, right? 50 employees to serve 24 guests a night, right? And so you're leading a massive team to create a very, very exclusive, really high-end, really technical experience for just a few people each night. I couldn't, like, I have a team of 50, right? I can't create all that fancy food that a restaurant creates every day. I can't run the business of that every day. I can't do all the interviews in the press and all that type of thing every day without having a team that you're navigating. And that's where I think that my value add is the ability to give the group a vision, convince them that that is the vision that we're all buying into, and you march towards the vision, right? And I think that's the same in like as I look back at my career, that's what I did in every place, is that you have an idea, you create consensus around the idea, and you lead your team there, right? And you know, you have some skills there, but you need the skills of lots of other people to succeed, and then you feel like an imposter at the end. So
do you think what you did on the job training is better than going to some fancy chef school?
I mean, for me, yeah.
Yeah.
But it was 15 years of working in restaurants, right? So it's not something that like comes over. Like I don't think you can work a couple of years in a restaurant and then expect to take over a restaurant. And then the other thing that I learned, like in my office professional career, was the basics of how to run a business, right? And so those are the two things that you need when you start a restaurant. You need the culinary aspect, right? And you have to know how to cook a meal and craft good flavors and all that type of thing. But then a restaurant, that's like 10% of it, right? And 90% of the restaurant is the business part of it, all the money and financials and planning your budget, and then marketing, and then like as the chef, you are like the chief HR person and dealing with however many people you employ. You have to deal with every one of their issues, just like when you're leading whatever group that you're leading, you're dealing with all the people that report to you, their issues, and then the people above you as well. You're managing up all the time as well. I was not, like Jose was above me, and it's like convincing Jose like what you want to do in the restaurant, and he has a different vision, right, or different way of executing a vision. So, yeah. So I think that like those two things, I didn't need to go to culinary school. But have I seen lots of people go to culinary school and learn? They teach you both in culinary school. They teach you the business side and the culinary side, and so I think it's an effective way to like make a transition if you want to do it. The cool thing, I mean, I will say this about restaurants. The thing that I like about restaurants is, as you can tell, I get bored easily, right? I switch jobs all the time. All that other 90% of the restaurant, that's the part that's interesting to me. I mean, I like the creativity and the craft of it, but I like every day that you come in and it's a new task, whether it's writing a business plan, writing a marketing plan, dealing with the press, dealing with your employees. So I like that part of it. I like that there's an amazing diversity in restaurants that you don't see anywhere else, on every intersectional issue that you can think of, right? So you have people who have had like really well-off backgrounds that are working in restaurants. You have people that have come from really hard lives that are working in restaurants. You have people who are highly educated, especially in DC. There's a lot of people who have switched. They're like, oh yeah, I used to work at the White House and now I'm working in a restaurant. And you have a lot of like racial diversity, ethnic diversity, and everybody's coming together every day I mean, it's like a cliche at this point, but restaurants are families. You spend all day with them, you eat your meals with them, you go out with them at the end of the night, and that's always been something that I really like.